Good morning, everyone. My name is Kate. Welcome to our Sunday class with Guy Finley. We are broadcasting live from here in Merlin, Oregon. Glad you can join us, all of you here in the room and all of you online as well. We have a nice day in store for you. So if this is your first time here, our format is that in just a moment, Guy will come on and give an hour-long talk. We'll take a short 5-minute break. We'll come back for part 2 of class, which is then an open Q&A discussion dialogue with all of you online. You can ask questions, make comments, talk with Guy directly. Folks in the room can come up to the mic. They all know that. So we'll run till about 11 or 11:30, somewhere in there, Pacific time. And we hope that you can stay for the entire session. But if not, all of this is being recorded, and you will find the replays online at our GoToWebinar channel, Facebook, YouTube. I'll tell you more about that later on. If you're in the room, if you have a cell phone, if you could please check and make sure that it is off, that would be appreciated. And also for you online, if you have any tech issues during the broadcast, you can just reach out in the question area, the chat area, send me an email at support@guyfinley.org, and I'll do what I can to help. All right, we're ready to get started, so I'm going to read today's topic and key lesson, and then I'll hand it over to Guy. The topic today is the truth that helps transform the fear of death into the fullness of real life. Here's the key lesson. Life is change. It is creation revealing itself. We can either realize our existence within its movement as a designated part of its divine design, or we can continue to struggle with unwanted moments in the false belief that the pain of our resistance to them proves we know how life is supposed to unfold.
Good morning. And just to get a little piece of personal business out of the way, I'm fine, I just don't look that way. It's a fact. Just having a little bit of a rough patch with the body. Necessary. I hope you brought with you your best brain tonight. Doesn't look promising, but I have my hopes. We're going to look at something deep, promising, fascinating. Something that we are working to awaken a new set of eyes, not just with our physical eyes, but with the parts of us that are capable of perceiving and then receiving new impressions. I'm going to talk about impressions this coming Wednesday. So the heading for our study is the truth that helps transform the fear of death into the fullness of real life. I don't think many of us realize how consistent is the presence of a certain kind of disease, a certain pain, certain fear. And that until we understand the basis of it, there's not a chance in heaven that we're going to ever be able to see that there's no moment that unfolds in our life that isn't intended to be unfolding exactly the way that it is taking place. Something we are very challenged to even consider because we're so instantly filled with resistance to anything that runs against what we have imagined life is supposed to do. So our study is going to take us on quite a journey within, in a way, a journey into, through, and past time itself, which while it seems to be a stretch, the day must come when you start to understand the nature of time in a completely different way. Thoreau in Walden's Pond. I remember when I first read it, he said, time is but a stream I go fishing in. And I thought, well, what an extraordinary thing to say. Time is a stream that I go fishing in, not time is a stream that's carrying me away and bringing problems and taking from me the things as it goes past, but it's a stream in which I go a-fishing. It is a movement in which I am, by grace, enabled to discover things about myself relative to the passage of time that cannot be understood unless I'm able to enter into that stream of time. Not as someone that is a subject to it or that is made to fear what comes, but rather that understands the very nature of my relationship with time. So I'm going to go up and down in this talk, as you'll see. Bring up the second key lesson because it sets the stage for our study. Please. Read along with me, if you will, and don't be afraid. It's so hard, isn't it, not to have an instantaneous reaction and thought that comes and says, oh, this, oh, that, what about this? Where in an instant we are, without knowing it, thrust into a pool of the past. A stream of thoughts that feels real and present because of how much it pushes on us, but that only pushes on its counterpart in this psyche, its time part. That's what's acted on. It reads, dust to dust, ashes to ashes. Nothing departs that hasn't first arrived. Nothing arrives that won't depart. The awareness of this fact, coupled with our willingness to embrace and endure all that it implies, ensures a glimpse of the following truth that, once realized, helps to release us from the fear of death. Even though all things must end, so do all things begin again in that exact same moment, a never-ending revelation of a life that never dies. The never-ending revelation of a life that never dies. Just for a heartbeat, if you can do it, if you can snap yourself out of whatever somnambulistic state you come to this talk in the morning or wherever and whenever you're listening to it. What is the nature of every fear that I have? You don't really know. But in the end, it is the fear of the visitation of a sudden onset of emptiness. A sudden moment in which all that you had banked on and counted to keep yourself content and safe and secure is obliterated by the smallest passage of a moment in time. Someone says this, someone does that, someone dies. You learn something about yourself that is so antithetical to how you've imagined yourself. You are asunder, you're smashed into a billion pieces, and now there is this emptiness. I must put the form back together, otherwise I'm going to die. And that's what every unwanted moment is the fear of death. Every unwanted moment is the fear of death, but you don't understand that yet. But when you do, you'll begin to have a completely different life because you'll be seeing things through completely new eyes. Sir Isaac Newton, how many of you know who he is? Thank God he made the fig Newton, because what cookies could I have if it weren't for Sir Isaac? He said, I don't know what I may seem to them. Keep in mind, this is a fairly brilliant man. I don't know what I seem to the world, but as to myself, I seem to have been only like a boy playing on the seashore and diverting myself now and then and finding a smoother pebble or a prettier shell than the ordinary, while the great ocean of truth lay undiscovered before me. While the great ocean of truth lay undiscovered before me. And why was it laying before him undiscovered. You know what he's alluding to? He's saying all of my thoughts were captured by the most shallow things. My petty concerns with what I call my contentment in this life, which can be washed away by a single wave that runs against whatever it is that I want in that particular moment. You have been called to enter into this great undiscovered ocean called God's life. Because the ocean that you are called to discover doesn't exist outside of you. You are a part of it, and it is a part of you and always has been. But you don't know how to participate. Here's a spiritual school. We'll put it someplace, anywhere in the world you want. Who wants to go someplace? Pick a spot. No, we're not going there. And as is part of their training, they sing songs. And in this particular day, we sit as a fly on the wall. And we can hear what they're singing. I am the bubble, make me the sea. I am the bubble, make me the sea. Wave on the sea, dissolve in the sea. Wave on the sea, dissolve in the sea. I am the bubble, make me the sea. And when they're done with that, more or less what it amounts to for mostly these days, that kumbaya, I feel great because I just sang this beautiful song. One of the disciples came to the master and said, I'm tired of just singing that song. I can sense what it means, but I want to know what it means. Wave on the sea, dissolve in the sea. I am the bubble, make me the sea. How do I become the sea instead of the wave? The master looked at the student and he said, well, it's really only possible when you at last get over the fear of The master looked at the boy, and the boy thought the master was kidding. The fear of How can there be the fear of What is that you say I have to get over if I'm ever going to know what it means to participate in the great ocean of the divine? Master said, well, you should know that without me having to describe it. The fear of uncertainty, the fear of the unknown, the fear of the unseen, the fear of the undiscovered, the fear of the unwanted. That's the fear of the boy. And you are the embodiment of the fear of the And until you understand that you are the physical expression of the fear of the there's no chance you will ever know what it means to be one with the ocean. He said, well, that's what I'm asking you. How do I go about what it is that you are saying? Because I can sense that it's true. He said, Master, I understand. We hear the idea. I hear it all the time. Long before I came to study with you, it's why I came, that we are already a completed being. That we're not divided up into all these different things, that we're a completed being. But I don't understand what it means. Now I'm bringing you in as that man or that woman. You don't know what it means that you're already complete. You don't have a clue. And I'm not being rude. I'm not being denigrating you. Because if you knew what it meant to be a whole being, you wouldn't have the fear of It would be impossible. Perfect love casts out fear. And it isn't until a person begins to understand the nature of perfect love has nothing to do with the nature of a person who imagines themselves as being a spiritual giant, who sees themselves as someone who has begun to break through the thresholds and the torment and are acquiring all the knowledge needed to excel. None of that has anything to do with real love. The nature of love that casts out fear begins as a person begins to understand certain truths that are evident right before him all the time in this ocean that we're describing. So let me tell you a story. I'm gonna anthropomorphize. That's a $40 word, isn't it? I'm going to make into a little person a wave. So Solomon, who oversees all the harmony on land, has a brother, Seagull. There was once a story, Jonathan Livingston Seagull. And just like Solomon, Jonathan, his task is to fly over the oceans and to watch and listen for anything that seems disparate. Some pain, some fighting amongst the sea lions. And he's flying along and he hears, and he's looking around, he doesn't see any creatures. Comes down a little bit lower, but it's moving. And he can't see anything that's moving. And finally, it dawns on him that there's a little swell in the ocean, and the swell is just moving along. And it's tough, he doesn't have any place to land, so he's got to hover. And he says, "Are you making that god-awful noise?" "Oh, yes, I am." "Why?" No, that was... He says, "Because I can see where I'm going. The whole thing's, I'm headed towards the shore. I can't go to the shore. If I go to the shore, I'm going to disappear forever. I'll be gone. I'll be a crash, and that'll be it. What'll become of me?" Jonna said, "You're awfully dramatic." "Well, what do you expect? My entire existence is about to have been for nothing." Keep in mind, we're not talking about something as dramatic as the physical passage of the body, but it entails that. "I just heard that you said something terrible about me. I just looked and saw on the news that something or other was something or other, and it wasn't something the way it was supposed to be the other, and my entire existence, I can feel it coming over me, crashing. Do you not in those moments?" So Jonathan says, "Can you be still for a minute?" "No, I can't. I'm moving." "All right, I'll fly along with you and talk to you. Let me ask you, little wave on the sea, what are you made of?" What a stupid question. What do you mean, what am I made of? I'm made of water. Yes, you are. You are made of water. But water is all around you. It's not complaining. It's not crying out. What is it that has you crying out the way you are? This is a stupid question. Look, I'm a wave. And I'm headed towards destruction. You're a wave. Yes, I am. First, he hated the fact that he was a wave. I can't show you all the different eyes that appear and stuff like this, but it's all inherent in it. Well, let me ask you a question. Keeping up. What is it that makes you into a wave? I'm a wave, he said. No. What makes you into a wave? There's a lot of water around you. It's not a wave. Why are you a wave? I don't know. Maybe it's the wind, because I can feel that a little bit. So you're saying that you are water that the wind is acting on. Is that what you're saying? Well, there's more than just the wind. There's stuff under the ground. There's the way the ocean floor goes. All these things. Jonathan says, okay, so you are made of water and you're in part made of the wind and the ground beneath you. Where is this water that you're made of? Where does it come from? Now the wave is wishing it could get to the shore to get away from Jonathan. What do you mean, what is the water made of? Where does the water come from that has given you this shape and that is moving you along towards what you fear is the end of yourself? Where does that water come from? I don't know where the water came from. He said, would you like to know? He said, sure. Well, first of all, it's all around you. And not only is it all around you, but the water that is all around you came from, if you want to use words, another kind of ocean altogether. Because long before there was water in this particular body, there was water that came here, and there was water that was made. And the water that was made from all of the different conditions that produced the water over billions of years. He said, so you really see, you're kind of billions of years old. He said, I don't know what you're getting at, but it's getting irritating. He said, what I'm getting at, and by the way, this is physics. What I'm getting at is that you have no individual form at all. You are made moment to moment to moment by everything that intersects this body of water that is plastic and that takes on the shape and the form and the energy of everything that acts upon it. And that the truth is, if you can deal with this little wave, you're not moving at all. It is the energy that is moving, and every place that it moves and everything that acts upon the body of water turns that body of water into a form that is called a wave, and it is the energy that is moving and taking the form of the water that makes the wave. You know when you sit and watch waves come in, doesn't it look like you're watching a bunch of individual waves come in? You're not watching individual waves come in. You're watching a certain body of energy that started out probably thousands of miles away from where you're sitting, and that energy collects itself in the wind and in the different thermal conditions. And as that energy collects and the bottom of the ocean takes the shape it does, lo and behold, the energy is formed into something called a wave because the water is plastic enough to take on the form of the energy. Am I communicating anything at all? I was in Florida, seems like a lifetime ago, and I was sitting there in my room, and there are some palm trees outside. And I had the strangest revelation when I was looking at that palm tree. And what the revelation is I was looking at perfect emptiness. And the reason I was looking at perfect emptiness is because that palm tree is a standing wave. Everything in creation is a standing wave. Everything. What does that mean? It means that given the plasticity, given the constituent elements of the body, in this instance, the ocean is quite malleable, isn't it? Isn't it? So it very easily takes on the energy that's acting on it. And it's malleable not just because the sun can raise all that ocean, lift trillions of gallons of water into the air because it's acted on. And isn't that, so the wave is a wave one moment, and the next moment it's a raindrop, and the next minute it's a stream in which I go a-fishing. So that palm tree that looks solid isn't solid at all. But we need it to be solid. Because the firmer the form of that which I look at, the more real is the self that observes it based on its knowledge of what it looks on, its experience with it, and everything that constitutes this sense of self as it measures what it sees, failing to understand that it is inseparable from what it is measuring to see. And then its measurement is a static, not ecstatic, a static perception of a wave. What is the tree other than congealed light? And what is that congealed light other than all the different forms and energies that conspire together at an intersection called the present moment, in which all of it is taking on the shape of a tree? When you look at a tree, you don't think you're looking at a wave. But I'm telling you, you're looking at a wave in time. A form whose momentary appearance is the result of the energies acting on the constituent elements involved in the formation of the tree. And when you look at the tree, it's no different than the wave. What are the elements that create a tree? Can you possibly name them? You have to go out to some distant nebula to pull in the idea that whatever that tree is made of started on a journey a zillion miles from here and then reached something that turned it into something that became something else. And then all of that was brought together by something that reconciled all of those forces to produce a tree so there could be a coconut so that someone could have a cocktail later tonight. We're almost and always captured by the onset of a sudden resistance. Now, I'm going to go back and ask you to travel with me. What is it that I resist other than the un? You must work. I can't do it for you. How many of you know that your day is filled with a lot more resistance than it is the joie de vivre over life? Yes or no? What's the resistance to? I look in the mirror, unbecoming. In every meaning of the word. Time, it's eating me. No, it's not. You have grown into an unconsciousness that measures everything and then creates some corresponding image, a form. And when the passage of time causes that form to move, to start moving or waving around, it doesn't look like it's supposed to look. then in that moment I'm filled with the fear of unbecoming. I'm filled with the fear of uncertainty. I'm filled with the fear of the unknown because I don't know what it means. And I can't suffer over not knowing what something means unless meaning has already been established. And it can't be established inside of this human being apart from what he or she ascribes to the moment in order that they may be the writer of it. One day you'll faint for seeing how much pain and suffering you give to yourself every day when something happens that you don't understand. And rather than recognize that the real moment of understanding is as transitory as the conditions that create the resistance, you identify with the resistance and fail to have the realization that that moment is a wave and it is moving, but it is not moving towards the end of itself. It is experiencing the whole of itself in one of its endless forms, in one of its endless possibilities. You know, when a wave approaches the shore, and I know, again, we think to ourselves that the wave is what's moving. The wave isn't moving. The energy is moving and carrying the molecules of the water into the appropriate shape as governed by all that is acting on that water in the moment. Yes? Where does the energy go when the wave hits the shore? Kind of quiet now. Does it disappear? Or is it all of a sudden made into a part of something that that wave could never know, ever understand, as long as it took itself to be the form? I'm trying to describe to you this idea that there is an entirely different order of yourself, but that you live from the order established by the form in time, knowledge, ideas, beliefs. And if you look carefully, which I would beg you to do, aren't all of those things that you've pursued the beliefs that you didn't create? You know why mankind made up beliefs? For fear of the shore, for fear of emptiness. Beliefs that seem to support the idea of a divinity, of a God, of an all-loving truth that overcomes fear. When everything the mind forms from the content of itself, it does so that it can deal with what it thinks may be coming towards it or what it's headed towards. And you've never found out. You've never found out. Well, here I can suddenly have this resistance. For instance, I'll just take my own face for a moment. You know, you wake up and something's happened to your face, which has to happen anyway. And why? Because I can see where this is heading. It's just going to get worse from here. I have to explain to myself. The little kids are going to look at me and go, "What happened to your face?" You can't know where anything is headed. Is the wave not always becoming a new wave because it is always being acted on by the forces that are forming it each moment? Yes or no? So is there anything in the wave that can know I am a wave and I am made of this or I am made of that? Or is everything about that wave plastic, movement, fluid? Well, how many times do you feel fluid other than steaming when things don't go the way you want them to go, when you don't feel the way you want to feel? What happens inside of you? It's called lockdown. Isn't it? Lockdown. Yes or no? Yes. Why? Why lockdown? Which, by the way, is prison. Why is everything locked down like that? Anybody? Because I have to have the form quite clear in order to know how to act toward the form in order to get past the form that this nature created. I've said this to you before. So this nature makes of the moment something that is not of the moment, but outside of it, because it brings into the moment those old forms, those old ideas, those old beliefs, and then it tries to make the fluidity of the moment match the form that it's supposed to be like. And that's called hell, isn't it? Now, I was trying to figure out when I got to a certain point in the material how I was going to express to you something that on one hand seems fairly ethereal, difficult to wrap my mind around. Because just being able to know the idea, wave in the sea, dissolve in the sea, it's simply saying that the wave realizes it was never apart from the sea that gave it its life. Is the wave apart from the sea? Is the event apart from the consciousness it rolls through? No. And if the event isn't separate from the consciousness from out of which it has come, then perhaps we can begin to understand that just like the wave on the sea that needs to dissolve in the sea, so must every sense of self that appears out of consciousness recognize that it appears out of that sea of thoughts, it appears out of that sea of emotion. And that if we're left to do what it is meant to do because it has been evoked by the conditions acting on that consciousness and triggering the manifestations it does, if it was left the way it's meant to be left, it would dissolve back into the sea. And the self that appeared that felt safe, separate and in danger, it would disappear just like the wave does when it lands on the shore. But how many of us have that experience? None. And this is where it becomes, I think, extraordinarily interesting, because how many of you can see, and this is key to getting to the exercise, how many of you can see that what I'm describing is a fact, yes or no? Well, if I know the fact, why aren't I free? Because there isn't the love yet. We can imagine what I call the perfect emptiness of that palm tree. And this is ludicrous that I'm even attempting this. That the perfect emptiness of that palm tree is that its form is unendingly being made new. It grows from the inside out, doesn't it? It unendingly, sunlight coming in, winds brushing it, the ground beneath it nourished, drying, wet, the very minerals themselves, all of the elements involved pouring into the predetermined shape called the form of the tree. But the form of the tree can't be separated from all that formulates it. And what is formulating the tree, like what formulates the wave, and like what formulates the self, is a ceaseless stream. And then not only is it a ceaseless stream, but it is being acted on itself by the tides. It is being acted on by the moon. It is being acted on by the planets. So that when you look at a tree, you're seeing the momentary manifestation of a wave that has taken on a solidarity that is literally the expression of everything that brought it into existence and is continuing to give it existence, which is why it seems to grow. The tree, see, we see the tree isn't growing. The tree is becoming another expression of what manifests it, so that we see all of the evidence of these intersecting forces and never realize that we ourselves are just like that. Trees how many of you have a wooden head? So rigid. So rigid. God, it is hell to be a rigid human being. And that's exactly what human beings are. Anything touches whatever it is identified with. It looks out and it sees something coming, or it's afraid of where it's going. Rigidity, just like that. Yes or no? What's the rigidity? Identification. And that's what's so crazy in a way. The rigidity is identification. What am I identified with? Well, let's go back to the wave. What's the wave identified with? It's temporary shape. But is the temporary shape of the wave? Or is the wave all of the elements, the sun, the moon, the tide, the planetary rotation, all the magnetic forces, everything, the butterfly flapping its wings somewhere in Brazil, all that business? Is that not all the elements of the wave? So why would the wave pick one thing to identify with? So I can be a wave. so I can be me. Because some days it's a groove to be a wave. Yes or no? I'm flowing. I'm in the flow. And then what happens? Suddenly the flow, suddenly the energy that belongs to another order of being that is acting within and upon and for itself, for the continuous, ceaseless revelation of its nature, of the ocean. All of a sudden, that flow is interrupted by something that seems to run counter to everything that I think is supposed to happen to me. And then I have the fear of un. So here's what I'm working towards. If I understand some of this, and will you agree, maybe a new impression of this? Because it does seem like that wave's moving, doesn't it? Just the energy. Energy collecting the molecules of water that will take on the shape of the energy. The water takes on the shape of the energy. You and I are meant to take on the shape of the energy and not believe that we are somehow separate from the divine energy that has given us the shape we have. And the shape is always changing because the divine is always changing the mixture of itself in order to produce a new conception of itself. And that is what we are intended to understand. But if I can grasp that with my mind, it's still a problem, isn't it? Because it doesn't make the pain go away. This is the big problem with spiritual ideas. I get all these great ideas. You know, I'm going to leave here and I'm going to wave on the sea, dissolve in the sea, make me a bubble. No, not a bubble. Make me a drink. No, that's not it. And I'm still in pain. But I can understand the pain. That's why the change of heart is so vital. That's why the idea of mercy. Because it's only as a human being begins to understand, how can I have a change of heart when all I know how to do is to try to change my heart into what I think it needs to do and be so that I can deal with the shore I'm headed towards or that's headed towards me. When the whole task is to empty the heart. To empty it of all the nonsense that it's been filled with, these ideas and these images, these beliefs. My precious self, my precious. Then I have something I can really struggle with. Because instead of remanding myself over to this form, identifying instantaneously and summarily with whatever the reaction is to the moment, and then seeing myself and calling myself. Imagine seeing and calling yourself one horrible little thing out of all the possibilities in the universe. Because that's what exactly this brain does. It visits in the mirror of itself, the image of itself that is resurrected when anything seems to challenge its identification with that image. And just like that, I'm a solid wave. And by the way, can a wave run into anything? How many of you run into things? A wave takes on another form. The energy can neither be created nor destroyed, only transformed. Who and what you are needs an updating, and not new software. A new self-awareness. A new order of awareness. So that you can do what? What do you think the exercise would be? If everything I've been describing, it is the fear of isn't it? Isn't that what your emptiness is? I was talking to a student, and this person brought up the idea of how compelled they feel to carry on their family tradition. And the conflict is that I have a love of family tradition. How can there be something wrong with that? But how can the love that I have be a painful compulsion? Why is it a compulsive pain? Why is it? It just can't be inherent in the idea of the tradition. But it is inherent in the idea of myself as someone who is mandatory and required to ensure that all of this goes on, because if it doesn't, oh my God, unendingness, uncertainty, unwanted, all the things connected with what happens with this emptiness, I'll have failed. So you must move from the fear of into the love of it. Now you say, well, how could I possibly learn to love uncertainty? How could I possibly learn to love the unknown, love the unseen, love the undiscovered, love the unwanted? That would be a trip and a half, wouldn't it? What if I could learn to love the unwanted? Does that seem like a stretch to you? Or do you at least see the possibility that of course one must love the unwanted, because to love the unwanted means that I'm not going to take part in wanting just what this is and not wanting that. I'm going to allow the whole thing to continue itself, move through me and me through it, and let it bring the revelation that it's intended to bring, which is what? That there's no end to the ocean. You'll fear the end. The whole reason that you carry on with each other and pretend to be like this and act out all the things that you do, this insanity of a psychotic culture, ensuring that at all costs, while underneath everyone's ravening, but on the outside everybody's kumbaya. And to understand how painful all of that is, and to realize I'm going to have to fall in love with I'm going to have to allow this moment that I am so certain is leading to a shore where I will be obliterated and there'll be nothing but emptiness. I must go all the way to the end of the emptiness. All the way to the end of the uncertainty. That means all the way to the end of this mind that never stops plotting and planning and figuring out what it has to do so it can be free in a time to come. Because the time to come that this mind imagines is the shore that it fears. Do you understand that? It's rushing headlong into the very thing that only exists because that mind created it as a safe haven for itself where it could finally escape its own fears. All the way into the unwanted. And why? Because that's perfect love. He maketh the sun to shine on good and evil alike. Be you perfect as your Father in heaven. When was the last time you let the sun shine on that moment where you thought everything had gone to hell in a handbasket? Or are you busy creating another heaven that, by the way, is the source of the hell in that moment? The love of beyond what thought can grasp. That's the love of beyond what thought can grasp. All thought can grasp is what it wants and doesn't want. End of story. And every time it has a want and a not want, it makes a form of itself by looking at the form it has created that it needs in order to be what it calls free. Is there freedom in fear? But can I find freedom from fear if I learn to understand the nature of this fear? That's what the love of is. It's the gradual recognition that what we call emptiness, what we call death, is part of a passage. That's all. That's all it is. It's a passage. But it's a passage we never make because we're too busy carving out a part for ourselves so that we can sail through it or get to the end of it. Every negative state, every bit of resistance, part of a passage. When a stream flows, is there any part of the stream that isn't part of the whole of the stream? And is there any part of the stream that isn't changing the whole of the body through which the stream flows? We mistake ourselves at the cost of discovering that within us is this ocean that can't fear forms, because every form that comes out of it is part of it and serving the ocean in that way, in that moment, and then returning to the ocean again. That's how your individual eyes should be. Each eye that pops up, and they do pop up, you can't stop them from popping up, can you? You know what I'm saying? Somebody says something, a certain eye pops up, doesn't it? You read a certain piece of news, another eye pops up. You look at a cupcake, another eye pops up. I'm just picking things that are... You look at the traffic, an eye pops up. You look at your financial records, an eye pops up. You look at your face, an eye pops up. Yes or no? And when that eye pops up, it is a wave, isn't it? But the problem is that the wave then becomes unto itself and never sees that it popped up out of another kind of consciousness, another way, an ocean of a kind. And when you begin to understand what I'm describing, you'll have this reaction, an eye will pop up, but instead of letting that eye become the whole of the event and then trying to figure out where everything's going, that eye will just come up and it'll just go back down like that. It'll come up and it'll go down. Go ahead and do this with me, just like that. Aloha. Just like that. And then your mind will be quiet. Then you won't have to figure out what to do and where to go and what to say and all the choices that you make, because you won't be making the choices anymore. They'll all be part of this perfect emptiness. Perfect emptiness is perfect fullness. Okay, is there anything more full than that palm tree sitting there with its yes or no? And yet it exists because it's perfectly empty. So are you, perfectly empty, but you don't know that part of yourself. But as you learn to accept the fact that all of that is this movement, then you won't be identified with fullness and you won't fear the emptiness, because you'll see they are inseparable. Inseparable. Emptiness, death, all the things that you fear belong to the fear of un. Learn to have the love of un. And there is a sacrifice in the love of un, isn't there? Because the sacrifice is I have to give up the fear of un. I have to give up the one who fears, don't I? But not because I'm spiritual, but because I understand. This has no place. This is the very cause of the problem I have. It can't bring the solution. Let's take a break. We'll come back and have our dialogue.
right, everyone, welcome back to part 2 of our class. In just a moment, we are going to get started with a Q&A dialogue discussion with Guy. If you're out there and you would like to participate in this, if you're on GoToWebinar, you can raise your hand now or at any point. Just look for that hand icon to click or tap, and that will raise your hand, and I'll know that you want to speak with Guy. If you're on Facebook or YouTube or Instagram, you can send a question or a comment into the question area, and I'll read it for you to Guy and the group. And yeah, so we'll get started with that in just a moment. I wanted to first, while we're kind of waiting for everyone to get settled, I wanted to first tell you about something kind of fun that happened here that could actually be a benefit to you. And we've been doing a lot of cleaning around here lately and sort of going through closets and rooms and, pulling out things and figuring out what to keep and what to toss. And in doing that, Chris and Roger found this box of CD albums that the CD album was just such a treasure. It's one from a while ago. It's called The Golden Rule of Self-Realization. And there were 60 CD albums in this box. And you know how, like, when you rediscover something that you have in your library, I've had this happen many times where I find a book that I have always treasured, but I forgot all about it. And I pull it back out and start reading it again and just fall in love with it all over again. Well, that's kind of like this album. I started listening to the first talk in this album again, and I want to just tell you, like, right off the bat, what Guy said. Like right at the top of the first talk, he says, we're going to learn what it means as human beings to be in complete agreement with life, with the divine, because the divine is life. And then he goes on to talk about how this set of talks would be, in these talks, we would be developing first a new understanding of unwanted moments, then a new relationship with those moments, and finally, a whole new set of actions with which to meet life. So as with everything that Guy does here, these talks were both inspiring and practical, and we wanted to give you the opportunity to get a hold of this album if you don't already have it. So we're doing a special little promotion where if you donate $10, we will go ahead and send you this CD album. Shipping is free in the US, and we know that a lot of people don't use CDs anymore, but we're going to include with this the full MP3 version as well, so you can actually download the album and start listening to it right away. And with that album comes a full PDF transcript and a bonus webinar. So all of this for just a $10 donation. And if you can't find a use for the CDs, you can always give them away to someone who still has a CD player. Give them to a local library. That's a great way to also pass on this great information and this wisdom. So if that's something that you would like to do, this is a great way to support the foundation, by the way. You can just go to guyfinley.org/golden. That's guyfinley.org/golden, and that will take you to the page where you can read just a little bit more about the album. And also you'll find the donation buttons there on that page. And again, we are a nonprofit organization. All of the work that we do is just to get all of these ideas out into the world as far and wide as we can, in whatever way we can. And you wouldn't believe the people who make comments sometimes about how they found this work. You never know. Someone might actually discover this work because you've donated this album to a library and they listen to it. I mean, we get notes like that all the time. So go to guyfinley.org/golden, and we appreciate your support. All right, I think we're ready to get started with our Q&A. So let's bring Guy back on. And Guy, do you want to say anything before we start, or shall we just jump right in?
I do have a comment, but also just for anyone local or here, I'm going to be down in the desert of California next Sunday, giving some talks and meetings. So I won't be in this room. I will be online as always, but I'll be broadcasting from down there. So there'll be no live class here on Sunday, but I understand Roger is going to set up the other building for students who want to come and watch the talk live there. So just so everybody knows. Also, there will be no Insight Timer next Saturday. I have to postpone that because I'm going to be doing what I'm going to be doing. So I have one, I guess it's just to strengthen an idea, maybe give the impression a little more power in your life. In the beginning, I spoke of this student who wanted the master to explain, well, what does it mean? You know, I get it. I understand what it means to be complete, but I don't feel complete. The whole talk was to clarify this idea that your true nature is always already being completed. There's no moment in which you aren't being completed, new. That's what rebirth is the experience of understanding there is no moment in which, whether you call it active and passive, whether you call it emptiness or fullness, there is no moment in which there isn't this interaction between these forces, and that you as a human being are given by grace the capacity to be aware of those forces that are forever bringing a new fullness out of emptiness, and emptiness out of fullness. That's what life is. The palm tree becomes the new palm tree because it empties itself of its former fullness. But it doesn't empty itself. It's just part of the movement of the yin, the yang, of the opposing forces. And then when it reaches the new fullness has served its purpose. And then the emptiness becomes, again, the place of the next fullness. And this just goes on and on. Well, the palm tree can't choose to do that. No form, no living, standing wave can extricate itself from the time in which it stands. But you and I are given the awareness that we can actually realize in that awareness that we are the sum of these parts. Not just emptiness, not just fullness, but the interaction of them. Their perfect union, always bringing about a new fullness from a new emptiness out of a new fullness. That's what it means to be already complete. You're a participant. And you may not know it yet, but you are given the ability to be aware of that within yourself. So then how could I have the fear of if the fear of is actually the realization of a new one coming into play? Please? Okay, Katie, I'm probably done.
All right, Guy, just a few people are asking for clarification. You're not giving a talk in public, a public talk that people can attend down in LA, are you?
No, these are private meetings down in LA.
Okay, but we will, like Guy said, our usual Sunday class will be broadcast online, so you'll be able to tune in on GoToWebinar, Facebook, YouTube, or not Instagram, but on Facebook or YouTube. All right, we have a couple of hands up, and I see also a comment from Annette. I'm going to take myself off. Let's go to Tony first.
Hi, good morning. Nice to see you, Kate and Guy.
Good morning, Tony.
Great talk, really wonderful. And I was wondering, the wave, we're all a wave, of course, but, in terms of frequencies, I think we sometimes operate at different frequencies, and that's where we get interference and dissonance as opposed to resonance. Mm-hmm. And, we're all just a reflection of physical principles as we understand them, observe them, and try to explain them in a universal manner so we all understand what each other is talking about. But that mystery, I just love it. And I just thank you again for giving me more insights, Guy. Nice talk.
Yeah, I'm glad, Tony. Look at it. I alluded to this. comes an impression. Our poverty as human beings is that we have become impression dead. And suddenly there is this impression, like the perfect, like how can something be perfectly empty and perfectly full at the same time? How is that possible? And yet there it is. But you can't see it with the physical eye, and thought can't embrace it. But it can be seen with a part of you that is itself a part of what you are seeing. It can be seen with a part of yourself that is not separate from what you are seeing. Then you begin to understand this idea that the observer is not apart from the observed. Because you begin to recognize it is an endless movement where the observation changes the thing observed, because now there are new elements involved based on what the observer was the moment before that. And you're awakened to a new world. And it's not all autographs and sunglasses. It requires a man or a woman understanding that as they see the truth of this thing, the more truth there is, the less of Guy there is. Because Guy sits outside of everything that he or she measures, failing to recognize that what he or she is measuring is the content of his own past. And that which is always empty and new is no longer just the past trying to keep itself in place, the fear of un. It is the replacement. It is I keep coming to the word. There is no possibility of transformation without there being the intersection of those forces. Each moment of life is the intersection of those forces, but this mind wanting to know what that intersection is and how to take something from it, make something out of that intersection from the content of its past, and then when the intersection doesn't marry up to the way it's supposed to be, then it has the fear of un. Yeah. On we go.
All right, we have Fiona and Cher in the queue here. I have a couple of written questions. And of course, just a reminder to anyone in the room there, if you want to go up to the mic, you can do so at any time. We're going to go to Fiona next.
Hello, Guy. Hi, everyone.
Hi, Fiona.
So thanks for the talk. It's absolutely brilliant to hear all those topics. Is such a vast principles, and it feels like it works into those polarities as well, because it seems like it's so vast and complex and unimaginable, but at the same time it's extremely simple.
Exactly.
At the same time.
Yes.
Yeah. So and everything is in the realms of what we're in relationship with. So what you were just saying is the observer, depending on what you've been given to see, is in everything. And I'm reading a book on complexity theory, on particles and waves and quantum theory, which is obviously fantastic. It mirrors the laws of consciousness, and it's very much shows how the level of the observer changes the experience depending on the experience is determined by what's been given, what the observer is able to see, which has nothing to do with me. So and it doesn't actually matter if I'm reading that book or I'm doing some cooking or walking the dog. It's the same experience, and that can be as rich as my ability to stay out of my life and observe it. So it's so it gets to the point where you just have no choice but you're just completely out of it as much as possible.
Yeah, we can go with that idea, but not so much out of it. Just grasping this strange, seemingly impossible notion. Does a river ever worry about its movement? Does it ever think to itself that this particular part shouldn't be like this? Because in a river, I remember when I was a boy, I'd go and watch these waterfalls. I loved waterfalls, still do. And how inconceivable it was that the smallest twig could call from a tree above the waterfall, and the minute that tiny twig hit the water that was coming into the waterfall, the entire waterfall changes, becomes a different waterfall with everything that falls into the water. Everything that falls into our life, everything that is folded into our life, changes the whole of our life. But we don't have the experience of the fullness of that constant change because the fear of says it must continue to look like this and feel like that. One day you'll realize that the greatest curse in your life was that you knew how you should feel and what to do about it. On we go, please.
All right, I'm going to bring in this question from Carl, and I'm going to send it to you here, Guy.
Okie dokie.
Carl says, could Guy give an example on how the observer changes what is observed? Can observing something like these states change them? Obviously, these states still go on, but how can this act change everything? Thank you.
I'm driving in my car and an idiot decides that he needs to pull his 22-foot-long F4900 into a space that is 21 feet between myself and the car in front of me. The moment the reaction starts is the same moment that resistance begins to play itself out. The resistance to the moment doesn't exist without something in me telling me the meaning of the moment and why he's an idiot. You must understand it makes no difference whether he's an idiot or not. What makes a difference is in that moment, all I see is the All I see is what's unwanted. So the observer of the unwanted is not separate from what he doesn't want. The observer of the unwanted moment is not separate from what he or she doesn't want. As long as he or she is part and parcel with the continuation of the pain of that moment, there is nothing that he or she can do to change that moment that isn't the extension of that unwanted nature and its unwanted experience. But suddenly you bring into that body of persona a new understanding. And the new understanding, at the very least, begins to suspect that maybe the pain of the moment and its continuation isn't because of that person, but because of a demand that was on that moment prior to that experience. Suddenly there's a new observer there. And the new observer sees the resistance instead of being seized by it. The new observer sees the resistance instead of being seized by it. And when he or she isn't seized by the resistance, the moment that was produced by it changes. And then there's a new impression that produces a new understanding, so that new understanding is given birth in this movement of emptiness and fullness, instead of an old understanding being kept in place and proving to that person that he or she is right to hate that person who did what they ought not do. That's my example.
All right, we're going to go to Cher. I'll bring her in. And then I have 2 written questions, Guy.
Okay.
All right, Cher, I'm not hearing you. Guy, are you hearing her?
Oh, that'd be a no.
Okay. Cher, we're not hearing you for some reason. Hang on. Yeah. So it might be that the audio, the mic source is something not selected properly. You can look in the audio tab to make sure you've got the right mic source. If you have a headset, you could take that off and just use your internal mic. I'm going to mute you for the moment, and I'll go to a written question, and you can send me a comment if I can help you technically.
Before you go to your written question, Kate.
Okay.
All of the stories, the old teachings, the koans, all of those ways in which truth was passed along by a living source to the sources that wanted to find life, they all stir certain strings inside of the heart. Like the old story, you know, the master sitting there and he tells asks the disciple, would you like a cup of butter tea? Oh yes, thank you, master, for serving me. And the master takes the teapot and he's pouring the butter tea into the cup of the disciple. And if you know the story, the cup gets full and full and fuller, and the master's still pulling the tea. And the disciple goes, Master, the cup's full. You can't put anything more in there. The master says, exactly. Now that story alludes to this fear of un. You can't put anything new into fear. It's already full. But it doesn't think that the pain that it's in is because of itself. It sees the condition as something that is overcoming itself. You are overcome only by your own resistance to anything that challenges your idea of what life is. That's the only thing that can overcome you. But when you start to understand, how can emptiness be overcome? See, that's why I'm making this segue. I know it's difficult to understand. That's why I have this tone of voice when I speak to you sometimes. Emptiness can't be overcome. Can it? Or is the nature of emptiness, everything that pours into it pours out of it? Just as the very nature of fullness is that everything that pours into it pours out of it. Because that's the nature of the duality at the level of the opposites. But you are more than the opposites. You are the form and you are the perfect emptiness in which they move and express themselves. And you have to see it. Not one thing that I have told you or have ever said to you isn't evident right in front of your eyes every moment of your life. That's why Fiona was saying it's really quite simple in one respect. It is really quite simple. But it takes the longest darn time, doesn't it, to get all of this complicated mind out of the way. Okay, now to you, Kate.
All right, well, I saw that Cher logged off and back in, and her hand is back up. Let's try again.
Okay.
Cher, you lowered your hand. You need to unmute your mic.
I got you.
Hello. Hi.
Hi, Sharon.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I got you.
Oh, yay. Hi, everyone. I just really want to come in and just really say hi. Guy, I get lost for words because words are very cheap in a lot of ways for me.
Yes, they are.
Because it sits so deep. But honestly, through this, I'm just so grateful that I have got connected with you and with all of you. I really feel like I've got to know so many of you through going to the different groups, study groups.
Yes.
That you offer. And anyway, if
love is
at one point,
Go ahead, Cher. I'm
Okay.
sorry. Please.
At one point, I almost felt my mind was becoming so quiet that I was kind of concerned.
Yeah.
And I thought maybe I was
That's a
getting
perfect,
the
yeah, that's a perfect
Anyway.
example of everything that I said today. I've done all this work and my mind is getting quiet. Oh God, what's happening?
I know. And I don't have any reactions. Like things happen and
Yeah,
it's like,
it's okay.
okay.
And then all that has to go. You'll see you and I are by our willingness to give ourselves as best we can to the truths that we are given, little by little, these new potentials, new possibilities appear. And whenever there's a truly new possibility, it terrifies the self that clings to all the powers that it thinks it knows and has. Who am I? I'm a stranger in a strange land. How can this be right? I don't know, but I do know that it is right that I'm seeing what I'm seeing, and I will let it lead me where it leads me. Then I will embrace what it implies. That was one of the key lessons. I will embrace the implication of this. I'll let it lead me where it leads me. That's what faith is. I don't know where it's leading me, but I do know that it brought me to see and understand something that I couldn't see and understand before. And though it seems like it's leading into perfect emptiness, still I will go. Why? Because I'm beginning to be shown that this perfect emptiness is synonymous with perfect fullness, because there's no self apart from the moment measuring it. This is all words, but it all is part and parcel with your journey, Cher. Just stay close, persist. Over to you, Kate. Wayne, there's a fire outside. I don't know if it's across the street or someone decided they didn't like the foundation. Okay. Thank you. I watched smoke
Right.
come up.
I mean, should we be evacuating or?
Well, I'm not sure, but that's why we have the man at the back.
Okay. All right. Well, until we discover that we need to evacuate, I'll go ahead. I sent you a comment from Annette that I wanted to read, and then I also have a question from Raymond. So Annette says, so this philosophy is a win-win one, keeping us in the moment, not as worried or preoccupied about the past or future, but rather taking things as they come and consciously responding, but not trying to control. What a breath of fresh air.
It is a breath of fresh air, Annette, and I would only add, if you will allow me, it's really not a win-win situation. It's the end of the fear of loss. And what a life that is. Over to you, Kate. Terry's coming up on stage as well.
Why don't you go to Terry first, and then I'll ask the question with Raymond.
Okay, I'm going to Terry first.
All right. Hi, everybody. My name is Terry. So I had an experience on Friday night that I think ties well with this talk today. So I was invited on Friday evening to attend a play in a local theater because one of my clients' kids was in it along with his father. And so the mom got me a ticket to attend the play. And during the play, so I'm sitting next to her. I've never, been in a situation with her out, in public at all. She starts laughing really loud and really strong at parts in the play that weren't even really funny. And there was this uncontrollable laughter that came up in me. And I felt it too. That was it was a form of resistance. It was because there was a self there that was concerned about what people were thinking that she was sitting next to this person. But I felt the tension in my body, and I came back to myself, and I wanted to just allow everything to be what it was. I just wanted to work on just being aware of everything, and it was just like that. It was so completely different because she would laugh, and then it was just this wave. It was just this thing that was moving through this awareness. It was so completely different than what previously had been this honing of this attention on that thing that was not wanted. It was so completely different. It was
Yes.
open versus absolutely closed.
Yeah, you're not going to, you can't escape the energies. They're incessant, intersectioning powers. They're there. You can't escape them. But what you can understand is the nature of what they make. And when you understand they are not making you, but are creating, if you will, from the constituent elements of your essence and all the things that have been in your past, then you start to see, well, naturally it's making something, but I don't have to go along with what I'm being made into. I can watch myself be made and unmade. And then I'm free. And not only just free, but I belong to another order of existence, quite literally, where I'm no longer punished by the fear of sitting next to a wacko. And just because some of you think that wasn't unkind, that was humor. Not if you're a wacko, it's not. Over to you, Kate.
All right. I just sent you a question from Raymond, and then Charlie actually slipped in a question. He's watching us from home.
Charlie who?
As well. But here's the question from Raymond. Would Guy be able to clarify for me a verse in the Bible that says, "Don't let your left hand know what your right hand is doing"?
Yes, I've actually spoken it a number of times, Raymond. Maybe you could search it out on the web. So I think that rather than take the time now, just ever so briefly, in the old traditions, the ministers, the priests, the shamans, the religious men, the religious women that served the king or the noble person always sat to the right side of the king or the queen. And the military leaders, the generals, always on the left side. So it's basically alluding to this idea that you are not going to bring into your I'll say it otherwise. When you pray, do it in secret. That's the meaning of that. On we go.
All right, sorry about that. You know what, I'm going to send you just this note from Charlie, and we'll wrap up our online discussion with that, and we'll turn it over to you in the room. Charlie says, I loved your comment, a palm tree is a wave in time. I've never met a tree that wasn't full of light. Why wouldn't that be true with us?
Yes, Charlie. Everybody say hello to Charlie. Waiting for my prodigal son, Charlie Mosier.
Hello, I'm Ellen.
Say it without an apology.
Hello, I'm Ellen.
Wow, do it.
You've told me that before.
Well, Ellie, because you don't know, you're a walking apology. That's the past carried over and over and over. Do it again. Scare us.
Hello, I'm Ellen.
Yes. This is it, Elizabeth. I'm coming.
Okay, so this talk was it was like a culmination of everything. And when you were talking about the tree and how it was a wave, it was moving.
Yes.
I was thinking of those time-lapse photographies you see.
Perfect.
Starting with a seed and then
Perfect.
it grows, and that's just in time. The time is speeded up so you can see what is actually happening.
Perfect. That is exactly it. And it is. It's just this elaborate dance of all these parts.
Right.
It is a wave standing in time, but our mind only sees the form in time and not all of the movement that it actually is being filled with and emptied of.
Right. So when they do that time-lapse photography and they show it on a nature program, they always stop when here's the flower.
Mm.
And that's just the way the human mind works. In actuality, that's not the end of anything. That's just a moment caught in time, but that flower continues to grow and go through whatever it will go through. And it's the same thing with us. We are in this constant state of changing. But we identify with this one moment. You know, how I looked in my high school picture, you know? And that's what I'm
Just picking anything at random, I suppose.
Because I hated the way I looked at my high school picture. But we identify with something, and then we're afraid of that changing. But that was just this one moment in this continuous change. I don't even really know how to say it. But we're in fear now because of that. And of course, we don't know what's going to happen to us in time, but I loved it. You opened the talk saying, our only problem is that we think that something is happening in the moment that isn't supposed to be happening. And if we could just be open to whatever is happening and not put a judgment on it,
Yes,
we would just be a part of that movement.
you have to be willing to allow what is changing to reveal the changes. When you resist what you think is happening because you don't want that change, then you never see that everything continues to change. It is a continuity. There was never a birth or a death. That seed never began and it never ended. It is a simple movement of a single intelligence in a form made of light, given its existence in a world where it is exemplified through a form, but a mind that only sees the static instead of the movement. Ecstasy is understanding the ceaseless movement of the divine, and you're a part of it because there's nothing outside of it to be afraid of.
Right. And I just wanted to say one more.
Yes, please.
Because lately I've been thinking about humility. What is real humility? It's not, I know it's not thinking, oh, I'm the worst person in the world. That's like the opposite of humility.
Yes, it is.
Because then you're arguing with God. And today you answered my question. Because what you just described, that is humility.
Perfect love casts out fear.
Right. Right. It's just being totally submissive in the moment without judgment, without fear, without any notion of something being taken from me in time.
Would that I could avoid this change, but nevertheless, thy change be done.
Right.
The room is still and silent. And if you are still and silent on your side, Kate, then we shall say goodbye.
No more hands, no more questions.
The fear of must become what? The love of un. Bye.